And I don't like sitting in a Bible class where there's not much. I want some scripture. Make me look at some things. So anyway, there's not as much tonight there, but I do want to parallel the history of what's going on in this part of the world where we're studying, and Christianity and the impact that the history side had on it. The first slide, I wanted to start off with Masada. Now, I don't know if you know anything about this, but it's a very interesting story. This is where it all comes to a final end for the Jews. The Jews, they're terminated on this mountain. It's over. I mean, it's over at Jerusalem. We'll talk about that in a minute, but this is their last stand. And then there is no Israel. There is no Jews. There are no Jews. They're kind of just scattered out. In fact, they call it the diaspora, I believe, something along that line. But Israel doesn't even exist from this point forward. Until 1948, and I don't know if you know anything about your modern history, World War II ends in, 1944, 45, right in there. But 1948, Israel's created. Now, I don't know if you know any background here. Israel gets created in 1948 because of the Jewish quote unquote problem. Nobody wanted the Jews. And everybody felt sorry for them as a people. The Germans had terminated, had killed millions of them. We didn't want them to all come to America. We didn't want to put it to Russia. Russia didn't want these Jewish people. So somebody came up with the idea, let's give them their homeland back. And that's what we did. And we carved out some land out there in Palestine, gave them Jerusalem. Of course, the Palestinians didn't appreciate that very much. And we created a nation of Israel that we know today. And it's one of our strongest allies as a country in that part of the world. So from 74 AD, really 70 AD, to 1948, there is no Israel. 1948 to present, there is an Israel as a nation. Prior to 1948, it didn't exist. In 73 AD, Masada fell to the Romans. Now, Masada is this fort on top of this big hill. And the fort that is Masada was extravagant. I mean, it was well fortified. This was the ace in the cards that the Jews were playing against the Romans. They knew if it got real bad, we can go up to Masada. Masada was a fortress built by King Herod. And it was quite a fortress. In fact, it was quite an undertaking for the Romans to actually get to the Jews who were up here high on this mountain. Now, let's pause and look at one of our verses there in Luke chapter 21. Luke 21, where it says, "But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her." When Jerusalem is surrounded, now's the time for y'all to get out of here and go to the mountains. Well, this was one of the places they could have gone to, was the Masada, the fortress on top of the mountain. And but they were told, when you're surrounded, you know it's going to be time to leave. And this is foretold there in Luke. All right. This is another picture of it. It gives you, from a little bit further back, just the scale of what the Romans had to do to siege that fort on top of that hill. Incredible. Now, I put the note up there that the Jews knew their history. If you look at the Jewish story, go back to Deuteronomy chapter 28. Deuteronomy 28. I want to read just 2 verses here, just for the sake of making a point. Deuteronomy 28. "Now it shall come to pass, if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all of his commandments, which I command you today, that the Lord your God will set you high above all nations of the earth. The Jews knew their history that they were going to be a blessed people, and it was going to go well for them. They also got the other end of that too. Slide over to verse 15, where he said, but it shall come to pass, if you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe carefully all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. The Jews knew their own history. They knew they were going to be blessed when they made good decisions, and they knew they were going to be dealt with harshly when they made the bad decisions. They knew their history. In fact, not only did they know this here in Deuteronomy, but also, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I don't want to get there quite yet, but they knew their story would end in, it's the next slide. In Daniel chapter 5, where it says, and in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. They knew Deuteronomy. They knew Daniel. They knew there was going to be a kingdom that's going to be the greatest of all kingdoms, and it's not going to be destroyed. Something was going to happen to their kingdom, and there would be an eternal kingdom. The Jews knew their history is the point I wanted to use on these two slides, and that great empire was going to be Rome. So our story starts in Masada and quickly moves to Rome because of Daniel 5:44, where it says, set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Now, stay with me because I'm going to change gears a little bit. The point I was trying to make is the history of the Jews was told them. Now I want to transition to look at some of the people that lays this story out. The first person I want you to look at with me is King Herod the Great. Herod the Great is an impressive character in so many ways. He master politician. He could be on both sides of the argument. He had a love-hate relationship with the Jews. I put a diagram that I found of him, but I also put the temple up here because one of the comments I wanted to make was he's the one that built the temple, the last temple. That part of the wall, I think, still stands on this temple. It wasn't the temple of Solomon. It was long gone. Herod built a great temple that was very impressive in Jerusalem. So this is Herod. This is his temple. Now I want to make a couple of points about it. First of all, Herod the Great is the king of the region. The Romans don't mind you being a king, but they were not going to have a king in Rome. Julius Caesar is going to be the master of the whole universe, but he couldn't take the title of king. He could become emperor, he could become whatever he wanted to. But when Julius Caesar is assassinated, the Ides of March, 44 BC, Herod joins up with the guy that he thinks is going to win the battle, and that is Mark Antony and Cleopatra. He had allies there. They were going to win the battle. Mark Antony, if you've seen the movie, Liz Taylor and Richard, who was the main guy there? Burton. You know, if you saw the old movie, you know, their love story entangles it all, messes it all up, and Caesar's nephew, Octavian, gets in the way. Well, Herod supports Antony and Cleopatra. They lose, so he quickly supports Octavian. Not everybody could be that smooth of a politician. Herod could. Herod worked both sides of the argument. Now, this Caesar Augustus, anytime you see Augustus, that's Octavian. That is Julius Caesar's nephew. He, not his son, but his nephew. So they're the same person. Another point. Herod the Great was good for Rome. And the reason Herod the Great was good for Rome, Rome did like him because he kept the peace. The region of Palestine wasn't a place that was real easy to keep peace. It was connecting multiple continents. There were multiple roads through there. It was a volatile region. Herod kept the peace. So Rome, they liked Herod. And then finally, notice his paranoia. Notice how he treated his family. He murdered 2 of his wives. He murdered one of his mother-in-laws. He killed his 3 sons. He was not just a nice guy. Look at the verse in Matthew chapter 2 that I picked out. Now, this is the time, I'm bringing this up because Herod is king of the region when Jesus is born. He's the guy that wants to kill all the babies. Go to Matthew chapter 2, a couple of verses here. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. King, where is he who has been born? King of the Jews. I underlined, King of the Jews. I'm going to skip to verse 3. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem was troubled with him. Skip over to verse 16. Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry, and he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all its districts from 2 years old and under, according to the time which had been determined from the wise men. Herod's the guy that's killing all the babies because he didn't want a king of the Jews to be born. What a story. The Jewish history from about the time of Herod going forward, there's going to be 2 major factions. The first are the Herodians. The Herodians were the Jews. They supported Herod for the most part. They wanted to be Jews, but Herod could keep the peace. And as long as we have peace, we're happy. That's the Herodian Jews. The other Jews were the Zealots. The Zealots their mentality was, we want to overthrow the Romans right now. Let's fight. So the Zealots were eager to fight. The Zealots needed the Herodians. Well, the Herodians needed the Zealots for them to have any degree of unity in this region. A lot of the Zealots were the Pharisees. All right. So the Zealots wanted to break with Rome. Now, Herod the Great is called the Great mainly because he built the temple and he kept the peace. But Herod could also be called Herod the Worst because the Jews despised him. He manipulated them, he killed them, and he was very harsh to the Jews. But he's not going to be harsher than those that come after him. We'll mention those as well. All right, the next slide. Julius Caesar. Now, Herod is there. He's king of the region when Jesus is born. Let's kind of take through the life of Jesus through Christianity. And let me make sure I didn't skip anything. Julius Caesar, I mentioned earlier, died in 44 BC. Now, wrap your brain around 44 BC. All right, that's, 40 years or so before Christ is born. And he's assassinated. And there's a power struggle that's going to take place in Rome. And as I mentioned earlier, Octavian, his nephew, is going to succeed the throne. He goes by the name of Augustus. Now, one thing that gets confusing to a lot of people is you see the word Caesar, render under Caesar that which is Caesar. The word Caesar, after Julius Caesar, becomes a title, especially as it relates to his family line. Any connection family-wise, the word Caesar really becomes a title. So the next one, notice the years. Augustus, from 31 BC to 14 AD. So he's the leader of the Roman Empire when Jesus is born. But Jesus would have been very young during the time he was there. He's referenced there in Luke chapter 2. Mark. In Luke 2, just the first verse at the introduction here. 2. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This census first took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, so all went to be registered, everyone to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with a child. So you have the story of Jesus being born during the time of Augustus, was the leader of the Roman Empire. After Augustus is Tiberius. Tiberius is the ruler of the Roman world during the teaching of Jesus, during his lifetime as an adult. He is mentioned or referenced there in Luke chapter 3, verse 1, where it says, "Now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, Herod being a tetrarch of Galilee, his brother Philip," so forth and so on. I just mainly want to mention that he is mentioned there in the Bible in Luke chapter 3. He is the reference point of render unto Caesar that which is Caesar. All right, I just don't want to skip anything. All right. And then there's Caligula. Now, I knew enough history before I really started digging a little deeper. You know, I knew he was crazy. Really didn't know much about Caligula. I knew he was kind of a wild man. There is one reference to him, maybe, possibly. The thing that is noteworthy about Caligula, that when reading about him, his big deal, he did not like how the Jews would not worship him. He wanted to put a statue of himself in the temple, inside the temple. And now, there was opportunities, there was worship done inside the temple that was supportive of the emperors. Look at Luke chapter 13, verse 1. Luke 13, verse 1, it says, there were present at the season some who told him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. Some of the leaders of Rome were very manipulative, and they were not well thought of, but it was a bridge too far to have the Roman emperor put his own statue inside the temple. This was a line in the sand the Jews were willing to die for. We're not doing that. We'll go to war with Rome right now. And it was very intense between the Jews and the Romans, because Caligula wanted a statue of himself. There is a reference to him. After looking at that, it's not that strong of a reference. It was one of my commentators that I used. I'll reference it and let you look at it. 2 Thessalonians 2, where it says, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself." This is the part that some scholars believe might be referring to him. Where it says in verse 4, "The son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." Might be a reference to Caligula. I'm not sure. It's just one of the commentators said that, and I thought it was at least worth mentioning that there were people that believed they were as God and as equal with God and deserved their statue in the temple. And notice the years, 37 AD to 41 AD. Now, Caligula is before he can get the statue built, And the intensity is becoming very hot between the Jews who were not letting it happen and him. Caligula is murdered, and the conflict settles down. So that's how his life ends. Then there's Nero. Notice the years of Nero, 54 AD to 68 AD. It was told in secular history, he fiddled while Rome burned. He blamed the fire that happened in Rome on the Christians, but it happened to be in some areas that were to be remodeled and the Romans wanted to rebuild and so forth. So maybe it was the Christians were an easy scapegoat, who knows. But he blamed the fire on the Christians. This is the person who was Caesar when Paul got into a bind and Paul said, when Paul says, I appealed to Caesar. You know, he was on trial, but he was a Roman, and he was told, well, I think I have a reference to it, Acts chapter 25. In Acts 25, now, when Festus had come to the province there 3 days, he went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. That's not it. I saw Caesarea and I thought it was Caesar. Verse 10, so Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat where I ought to be judged. And there's other references to Paul wanting to appeal his case all the way to the Roman leader. He appealed all the way to Caesar, which is his journey to Rome. Which, kind of opportunity for a plug for VBS. This is what takes him to Rome, and that journey was such an unbelievable journey. He finally does get to Rome, but it was Nero who probably ordered the execution of Paul, and Nero was the leader who was constantly killing and having the Christians killed. He was brutal to the Christians. The blood of many martyrs were shed by Nero. All right. Seems like there was one other thing about Nero. I have a reference to verse 12. That's fine. Nero was put on trial near the end of his life. And one thing that Nero does, he sends his best general, who's this guy, who's going to be the next emperor. He sends Vespasian to go and take care of the Jewish problem. You go take care of those Jews. But Vespasian is going to go there, and he's sent by Nero to destroy Jerusalem and in effect, destroy the Jews. He surrounds the city, and then while he's there organizing the destruction of Jerusalem, Nero all of a sudden is on trial with the Senate. Now, usually the way this went, the Caesars, the leaders of Rome, they had free reign. They could do pretty much what they wanted to. Every now and then the Senate had enough power, if it could get enough support, to rein them in. Well, Nero did a lot of crazy things, and finally the Senate holds him accountable, and they're going to remove him. Seems like, and I'm going off memory. Maybe I don't know if it was a death sentence or just removal, not sure, but they were going to get him. And before they could get him, Nero commits suicide. And he killed himself. And now Rome is in turmoil. And their best military guy is over here surrounding Jerusalem. Jerusalem is surrounded by the best general of the Roman Empire. Back in Rome, the leader has committed suicide. Vespasian gets on his horse and rides to Rome as quickly as he can. For political reasons, obvious, but he's the one that's there. And He returns from the Jewish rebellion and he successfully reclaims the throne after Nero killed himself. His son is named Titus. And he tells his son, you go finish the job. So it's Titus that's going to go finish the job of what Vespasian was supposed to do. Vespasian was to destroy Jerusalem. He's now emperor of Rome, but he wants the job to be finished. And now, so he has Jerusalem surrounded. I go back to the original picture I showed you when we started, Masada. Not necessarily for the picture of Masada, but for the verse. Go back to Luke chapter 21. Luke 21, verse 20. I want to read it again. Now that you kind of see the picture, note it. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her. For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Woe to those who are pregnant, and those who are nursing babies in those days, for there will be great distress in the land, and wrath upon the people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. This is a big deal. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. Now, notice the picture I painted. Vespasian is there, surrounds the city, and leaves. The prophecy here is when you see the city surrounded, you leave. What a perfect opportunity for the Christians to get up and get out of Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. This event is one of the greatest events in history, because think about what we've been covering in Brother Jeff's class is Abraham. Help me remember, it's the seed promise, the land promise, and the nation promise, all the way back to Abraham, and all of those were given to them as a people. But they weren't going to get it forever. They were God's chosen people. There are people who who claim to be Christians today who thinks we have to protect that land. Those are God's chosen people. They were God's chosen people. They were significant. They were important. But here they're surrounded and it's all fixing to be destroyed. It didn't end at Masada. It ended at Jerusalem in 70 AD. Jerusalem ended. Now the remnants, the Zealots, they had a place to go and they could fight a few more years. It's kind of like the story of the Alamo. You know, I teach Texas history, and the first day of school, I always talk to the kids about the Alamo. And I said, raise your hand if Texas won the Alamo. Every one of them's hands will come up. Everybody. They think we won. We lost. You young people, we lost the Alamo. But we won the war. The difference here is they lost the Alamo and they lost the war. It was over at Jerusalem in 70 AD. It all comes crashing down. And there's so many things that point to that, especially things like the Jewish history. You had to have your name. You were of a certain tribe. There were certain things that were just so focused. You weren't just, it wasn't like just joining and hooking up with a church, a congregation of people. You were of a tribe. And all of that is destroyed. When Jesus comes in there, not one stone's going to be left upon another stone. And so that's the story that I wanted to share with you. I got a couple more. I mentioned Titus. Titus rules Rome from 79 AD to 81. He's one of the sons of Vespasian. And then there's one more. Vespasian's other son is Domitian, 81 AD to 96 AD. And he's the one that's going to do a lot to persecute the Christians the second time around in 95 and 96 AD. So that's kind of the history lesson that parallels the Jewish and Christian history at the turn of the century from the time Jesus was born. until Paul dies and the Christians dies, and what happened in 70 AD and the significance of it and who was in charge and why. So a little bit of a history lesson tonight. I didn't really get a chance to offer an invitation in that, but let me suffice it to say we will never have any kind of service along these lines and not offer an invitation for someone that would like to be a Christian, or they want to put on Christ in baptism, and they want to be a part of that. And there's also an opportunity for someone who has other type needs that they would like to maybe have prayers offered on their behalf or something along that lines. If you are one of those, if we could serve you at this time while we stand and sing the song that's been selected.